All right. So, Duruk, here
Hello,
we are
Ethan.
again.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you. And you know, before this, we had an earlier conversation, and we talked a bit about unknowns, and we talked about AI, but we also talked about unknowns, and we didn't get so much into the
Yeah.
unknowns, but that triggered or that prompted something for you, which is something you have a lot of passion about. So,
Yes.
would you like to share what topic you want to talk about?
Yes. Are we referring to the certainty or
Yeah,
certainty in the business context? Yes.
yeah.
So towards the end of our last conversation, just before closing off the record, actually, I realized that I am actually very passionate about a contemplation around our relationship with certainty, especially in the business world. This is an important topic personally for me because I am going through quite a lot of uncertainty in my life. So definitely coming from a more certain business world or in a world where I had to practice lots of certainty into this new world where there are so much unknowns. I am personally navigating quite a lot of things around uncertainty. But the more that I think about this, the more life is also throwing quite a lot of personal experiences into my life where I
Hmm,
am agitated by some of the expressions of certainty in the business world. What I mean by
hmm,
that is really throughout my experiences, lots of decades of global business interactions, I have realized that the way that we perceive leadership is very much interlinked to a charismatic leadership concept.
hmm,
And the way that we define the charismatic leaders in today's world is it's really mostly someone that comes with clarity, certainty, very assertive personality. And this was really triggered when I was also using Grammarly, which is a writing AI tool that really helps you to correct your grammar mistakes and stuff like that. And whenever I changed the context to business, I
yeah.
realized that this tool is always correcting me. And my personal style is very open. I say, according to me, I believe that this is in my opinion. And whenever I try to add that personal dimension when I'm articulating my point of view, I was really agitated by the tool trying to correct me and try to make me use more declarative voices saying that
Hmm,
this is a truth and this is how you need to communicate it to sound more confident and to sound more authoritative in the business world. And I said, yeah, this is so true, because this is really fed with all of our assumptions and all of the ways that we practice leadership today. And of
hmm,
course, I'm not really blaming technology in this case. This is how we practice business. And this really triggered quite a lot of things personally for me because I have huge respect for experience, life wisdom. And as someone who has been in leadership roles too, it's not easy to win that position. Of course, that comes with quite a lot of like experience. And there's
hmm.
something to be respected there. And of course, the demanding roles of the leader sometimes really pushes us to be more authoritative, to make quick decisions at point of views. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we are not human beings. We are also human beings. And as leaders, whatever we bring into the table is also just one point of view. That
Hmm.
one point of view that can come with quite a lot of wisdom. And yes, we might have solved many, many problems like 10 years ago, maybe like
Yes.
5 years ago, but the business context is changing so much too. So I'm not really neglecting the value of assertiveness, quick decision-making capabilities, or the confidence that comes with some of the leadership qualities. But it's also important to balance that with a little bit
Hmm,
more humility, authenticity, with a little bit more openness, with a little bit more invitation to uncertainty, so that
hmm.
we can acknowledge that what worked 10 years ago might not work today. So I'm not the only authority in this world too.
Yes.
And knowing where the world is today, I think our world is really inviting us to be a little bit more less certain
Yeah.
and to be more open in terms of our leadership too. So that was actually where I left things off. And unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to hear your point of view or your reflections out of my definition. I'm eager to hear your reflections too, Ethan.
Yeah. Well, this is such a um, a deep topic. Like we can look at it in many ways. Like from the perspective of a coach, um, when I'm coaching or when I started off coaching, I was very keen to offer certainty to my clients because they came in not knowing. So it was
Mhm.
so tempting, they'd be
Yes.
like, help me find this. And they're like, oh, well, you know, and then I can just offer some principle or
Yes.
something like that. And they would actually appreciate it. They'd be like, oh, great, thank you, So it seemed to solve the problem. Like I felt useful. They got what they wanted. But then there's deeper implications. Like one implication is they do not learn to live in the
Exactly.
unknown.
Yes.
So the next unknown comes up, they need to go look again
Yes.
for another problem, another fix.
Yeah, exactly.
And the fix is always somewhere out there, right? So if you have a leader, like in a business context, if you have a leader who always has the solutions, the rest of the team learn that they do not ever need to create solutions, or they lose that connection, the ability to find their way. Like
True.
that's one implication. Yeah, what are your reflections on that?
This made me remember a famous story. Instead of really feeding someone who is in need of food, teach them how to fish, right? So they can learn the practice. It's so important. It's so important in the business context, so that instead of really creating interdependency, we can really co-create together in a collective wisdom. And yes, there might
Yes.
be more responsibilities given to the leader, given their life experience, given their business expertise and experience in some certain area. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we should create this strict interdependency. And I think we see
Mm,
this so much in today's world because we are always so impatient. We are always looking for the answers immediately.
yeah.
We are creating this culture in the business world, but also in general in our world, so much dependency on subject matter experts.
Mm,
Again, wonderful. I am actually coming from a part of the business world where subject matter experience is really important. I worked in healthcare, which is a complicated area, then healthcare technology. In both of these areas, subject matter experience and expertise is extremely important. So I'm not saying anything against the importance of subject matter experts, but
mm,
this again needs to be balanced with internal wisdom. And
mm,
I think we have seen so many recent examples of this globally during COVID, for example. No
yeah.
one knows what's going to happen. It's your
Mm.
body. And I was really going crazy observing different point of views. And this was such an important demonstration of how we are so much dependent on an external point of view. Of course, it's a worldwide unknown issue. Of course, we will trust in subject matter experience expertise. But again, I see so much imbalance in terms of people not even
Mm,
knowing what their bodies needs. This is again
yes.
coming back to your coaching system. Like
Yes.
if I don't really tune into my body as a human being,
Yes.
there is no doctor, there is no physician who's going to fix it for me because I am the one living in this body. Yes,
Yes.
there's collective wisdom in the experience of subject matter experts, in the experience of leaders, but there is also so much value in our own humanity, in our own inner wisdom. And I think in our world, we're not really allowing us enough time to look inward, to connect
Mm,
to that inner wisdom in the business too, in the
mm,
personal life too. So we are creating this so much interdependency on the external world.
yes. Mm, yeah. And you've seen y- you've seen some of these leaders or this leadership style that you're talking about.
Yes.
And from what you've seen, like what do you think is behind it? Like what would cause somebody to lead that way? Because I'm asking because if somebody's listening to this and it's not black or white, there's a scale. But if we maybe can help somebody who is in a leadership role to see some of this in themselves, that may be the start of a change.
I think everything starts with awareness first.
Yeah.
Um, I see this as a generic pattern in the business world, as a dominant pattern in the business world today. It is
Mm.
changing, but to be able to go against a dominant pattern, first,
Yes.
you need to have an awareness. You need to identify, oh, I am doing this. And I'm not so sure whether this is the right way to go,
Yes.
questioning, and then taking a stance or taking an active role in
Mm.
correcting the balance towards the right dimension. Everything I think starts with an individual as a leader, literally learning more about their own leadership style. And we all have different leadership styles, and each leadership style comes with some strengths and some weaknesses. But I
Yes.
think, again, this is not a judgment towards any particular leadership style. What I'm only saying is really there needs to be a little bit more balance towards a little bit more open,
Mm.
authentic leadership style, where a leader can also come with their full presence, with all of their uncertainties as well,
Yeah.
and be the living and breathing example of a human being
Mm.
in a leadership role. And
Mm.
hopefully, through their own experiences, being first a good example to the others and empowering and inspiring others
Yes.
towards change too. And
Mm.
another, I think, important thing to unpack here is really when we really look back into primary reasons for why do we even have these patterns,
Yes.
right? Because in leadership roles, the assumption is that you need to build trust so
Yes.
that your group needs to follow you, right?
Mm-hmm.
They need
Yes.
to respect you. And the assumption is that if you come in with very powerful opinions, with perfect certainty, as if you are the God, all knowing, that will create trust. And unfortunately, in many of our organizational structures, yes, there's a force behind it. And someone who has the power and the status can have that force in the
Yes.
group to guide decisions into certain directions. But I think the healthier, more natural, and more sustainable way of really leading an organization, any group, any human connection towards a collective vision is to inspire them, is to earn their trust instead of really fake it till you make it and
Mm.
by some strategies try to look like you're powerful. I
Mm.
think the most important thing, especially in today's world, is really acknowledging that no one really knows anything and everything. And
Mm.
it's okay not to know anything and everything. And even normalizing this and breaking the ice around this godlike leadership role where we
Yes.
always have to pause as if everything is intact. But then it's also quite a lonely journey. People also say that it's quite lonely on the top. Yes, of course it's quite lonely because you always have to fake it as if through that faking you will earn trust. And that also comes with the assumption that people not really will feel it. It's not about what we say. Sometimes even our silence and only our presence communicates.
Mm.
And I think we need to invite these principles more into business and bring more of ourselves into the business too.
Mm. Yeah, I love this just because it encompasses every part of our lives. And like you said earlier, like I like that you said that this is not a judgment, because it's, we're going back to somebody's education, their environment growing up, the
Sure.
experiences that they had with other leaders. And so often we go from an individual contributor to a
True.
leadership role, and then it's just like, oh, here you go, start leading. And
True.
what is a person meant to do? They've got to flounder and try to find certainty somewhere, or try to project something. And so that is often the most obvious thing. I had a client uh, who at home was very warm and loving and so forth, but in the business world, like cutthroat. And that was her story. was, well, this is business. The business world is cutthroat. So, I've got to
Right?
be like, dog eat dog. So I'm going to be the top dog. And,
Yep.
and for her, the awareness came about from pain, and it often does. It's just like, wow, something is really not working.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel good. My
Yeah.
team doesn't feel good. People try to backstab me and whatever. And like something has to change. So that's like one avenue to start looking. And for her, it was like, okay, help. I want to change. I really want to. I don't know how.
Yeah.
And we've got to actually go several layers deep to find these stories of, well, I'm not safe if I don't know. Like, I don't, yeah, I have to be a certain way, or this world is a certain way. Because if we don't change that, then, we're trying to, yeah, like the whole old saying, shift deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yep. It's funny. I think it's also a beautiful human dealing mechanism with the nature of life. Life is the most uncertain thing. It's a total sum of uncertainties. There was a quote, I'm not really great with the names, but it was saying life is a total sum of things that happens to you when you're planning. Something like that. The
Yeah,
essence was that.
that's it.
It's so true. Like in business world too, we do this strategic planning, come up with financial projections for the next 10 years. And everyone knows that it's nonsense.
Yeah.
And no, it's same true in life too. I think it's a part of human journey. Again, I would like to maybe even step back and look into why we are dealing with this tendency in the business. It's a human tendency. As humans, it's a lifelong journey to be comfortable with change and acknowledging that, yes, as an individual, we might have some aspirations, some visions, some goals, but in the biggest spectrum of things, we're just a little small sand in the ocean. In that sense, most of life is really happening to us too. It's a co-creation, but that co-creation requires sometimes really full surrender and
Yeah.
trust to life, knowing that it's okay not to know. And although I'm not a surfer, like most of there are so many, I think, sports analogies. I really
Yeah.
like the way that one of my surfer friends was really articulating how it's really like a practice of life. Like, yes, you are giving some direction, but you are going with the waves.
Yeah.
And life is exactly like that too. In business too, I think it's really important to have some long-term point of view vision as a leader, have some life experience, have some subject matter experience and expertise that can give you some kind of prediction power into this fully uncertain future. But I think it's really important to build the muscle of how to deal with uncertainty. This is the teaching the fishing part. And I
Yes.
think as organizations, the more that we invest into this, certain leaders who knows everything and they're going to save our world and throwing away millions of dollars to hire the best subject matters expert in a particular area because they're going to save the company. Yes, let's do that. But let's also invest some of that investment to employees, to the individuals, for them to learn better practical ways of dealing with uncertainty.
Yeah.
Let them be a part of this co-creative process of life. Empower the individuals, not at the top, also the employees who are
Yes.
closest to this uncertainty, who are dealing with uncertainty every day in and out, so that they can respond to this uncertainty in a more flexible and reflective manner. I think, to me, balancing is this. Again, I'm not saying that it's wrong to have leadership, to have this subject matter experience and expertise, which is needed. And it's a core part of leadership. It's a core part of minimizing the risk of this future uncertainty. But it's also important to build the muscle in the organization with the right, true, authentic leadership, to even sometimes acknowledging that it's okay not to know too. To me, I think that's also a very important thing. Once a leader openly demonstrates that it's okay not to know. And yes, I'm a human being too, and I have my vulnerabilities too. And yeah, I have this title too. I think that really humanizes quite a lot of things. And then
Yeah.
that really empowers other individuals, like the one that you mentioned, to say
Mm.
that, yeah, it's okay. I'm not the only one faking this. And maybe we don't need to fake it all too. And then find the right cultures as well. The
Yeah.
more that I think we become all of ourselves in every context in life, including business, it's, I think, the best long-term strategy for success for the individual, for the leader too. Because instead
Mm.
of really faking it till you make it in a certain culture, the more that you become yourself, the sooner it's going to become clear that you don't belong to a culture if it's not really supporting your leadership style too. So
Mm.
to me, it's also the best human strategy, not only in business, just be yourself so that you can find the right communities, right people who are going to love you just because of who you are. So you don't have to fake it. You don't have to really behave like someone just to be loved. And I think to me, that has always been a dear issue, big contemplation that I've been carrying inside me. And personally, I'm really paying a lot of attention about what authenticity means in our personal
Mm.
lives and how we can bring more of that into the business context.
Mm.
And unlike what many people think, how it can actually be the only long-term solution and the most effective solution for effectiveness and efficiency towards the common goals, towards the
Yes.
similar people working towards a common vision. If
Mm.
everybody can become more of like themselves, then we can connect to the right individuals, right cultures.
Mm. Yeah, there's a few things you said there, Dirk, like I really want people to hear as well if anybody's listening. It's like you know, you talked about building a muscle and normalizing things as well, normalizing
Yes,
not knowing and being human. And I think those two things are very important. Like the first step, like one of the things that blocks us from awareness is that it's painful to see where we are, you know, falling or, you know, failing our own self-identity. So I, as a leader, I do not want to see that I'm a bad leader, you know, or like it might be really painful to say I am a bad leader. So if my identity is like, if this is about who I am, I don't want to admit I'm a bad leader. But if this is about a muscle, if this is about something I can learn or actually unlearn, that's different. Like, oh, I've learned some ways of leading that are actually not my authentic way of leading. They're actually not true to me. It's just ways I've learned to survive in the world.
that's beautiful. And I think that part is really humility, acknowledging that life is really us going through quite a lot of challenges and lessons just to learn, and just accepting that, acknowledging that, yes, I have done all these things in my history too. That's humanity. And to me, if someone can do that, that's it. That is humanity. That's
Yes.
actually a true leader, acknowledging that, yes, I've done many mistakes too, but here
Mm,
I am taking the first step and
mm.
trying to do better. Instead
Yeah.
of really fake certainty, I think we need more of this in our lives, because that is really openness.
Mm. Yes, and you said that to make it practical, like people to get training, you know, get coached and so on. You know, for you, what has been most helpful? Like, so if we can offer something practical, like what has been really helpful for you on your own journey, like moving towards authentic leadership? And then I'm happy to share from me as well.
I think the specific example I was referring to was really balancing a muscle just to deal with uncertainty more. And I
Right.
think any form of artistic exploration is an amazing venue to practice that, because it's really creating something out of nothing. It
Mm,
could be just writing, which is my thing. It
mm.
could be dancing, it could be painting. I think the artists are the ones who are really, really good with dancing with life. And
Mm,
appreciating the diversity in life and really incorporating so many different point of views and bringing something out of it. Personally, I'm always leaning towards storytelling a little bit more. Recently, fairy tales, all of these kind of things is really breaking the ice in my mind, especially like fairy tales. People really feel like it's really for children. There's a famous, again, saying, I'm really bad with the names, but maybe we can add this into the notes onto YouTube. People think that fairy tales are for children. For children, fairy tales make them sleep, but fairy tales are also to awaken people, especially for adults. It is so true. And throughout the course, it was really forcing us to forget about the logical part of our minds. In a fairy tale, like once upon a time, there is no time concept. In a fairy land, where everything and anything can happen, the trees can speak, an egg can walk. Like, it is really according to our rational business mind. Like, this is nonsense. And everything is uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen when the child turns around the corner. And to me, like, I literally took this course over the last 6 months just to build that muscle of nonsense. And this, like, everything doesn't need to be logical. Let the inner child play hard through the fairy tales. And I think there is so much power in art. Personally, for me, this turned out to be in the form of poetry, in the form of fairy tales, where a different muscle is working. I think whatever we do with our imagination, where we don't have to really put boundaries like we always do in the business, like, this is nonsense, everything needs to be logical and rational. It is a very useful practice to build that uncertainty muscle and to bring more imagination and creativity into our lives. And I think we need both. One is really this expansion without any limitations, like go crazy. And without really going crazy, we can never fully actualize our human potential, and we can never actualize our organization's biggest potential as a collective group as well. And to me, these more of the like artistic explorations, more of the feminine energies in leadership too, allows us to really expand. Then out of that expansion, and we can also use design thinking, like brainstorm as if anything and everything is possible, never judge anything. Then from those options, scale it down. And I think I'm not so sure whether most of the organizations are also opening too much space even for design or design thinking, this artistic breathing space to exist, so that we can have enough depth and really breadth to really narrow things down with so much control, so much certainty. I'm not so sure whether we are really reaching to the maximum. It's always the next biggest thing, but how do we know that the next biggest thing is the right potential for optimizing our potential as a human or as an organization? So I think a nice complement might be really artistic explorations and bringing this into the business world more too, instead of really only reading business books and taking serious artificial intelligence or technical courses. I think every business really serious needs to invest in the artistic courses or needs to code. And this was also another proposal that I made in my previous company. I said, like, why don't we had book clubs for serious business books? Not that we shouldn't read it. We should read it as business people. But my suggestion was really creating a poetry club. And I said, someone said, why poetry? Like, I like playing guitar. I said, yeah, bring it. Like, I think there needs to be some space for employees, for leaders, for the company people to practice that muscle within the context of business too. And again, if we don't really have this boundary, like, oh, I can only play guitar and I can only share my poetry in the personal world because I'm a serious business leader in the business world, that doesn't really create synergies. And you're really not using the full potential of your humanity in the business world, and you're not creating the most innovative solutions. And then we are wondering, like, why are we assuming this Me Too product world? Of course.
Yeah, I love that.
What are your practices?
Oh yeah, just wanted to respond to you, and then I'll share something as well. But I love that you pointed to art, because I have to say, for me, it was like always about science and about technology and like frameworks. Yeah, so I would, like, art didn't seem to have any use, when I was growing up. So I did computer science, and then reading business books and so forth. And now it's like
Total
pretty much
opposites,
flipped
right?
around, because I'm so drawn to, wow, what is this? What is it that we're actually doing here? Like, what are we, like, what is the nature of creating? And so when you talk about art and play, it's and something like design thinking is saying that, oh, the unknown isn't something that's bad and to be avoided, which is like the old business world.
Yeah,
The unknown is where we live.
exactly.
So this is how we create. We create with the unknown. So something like this book, I don't know if you know this book, but
Oh my God, it
oh my
is the
God,
best
yes,
book I read
it,
recently. It's like a Bible personally for me. And I don't know, I'm not saying this with religious connotations. Sorry, I didn't want to annoy
yes,
and disturb anyone's point of view. To me, it's really one of the most essential books that every human being in the planet needs to read it. And especially just given this context and conversation, I would
yes.
recommend every business leader. Like if I'm a CEO, I would make definitely this as a mandatory read to all of the employees.
Yeah, that's it. Because you're
And distribute
loosening
it for free.
this. Yeah, absolutely. Because you're loosening stuff that is tightly held in the mind,
Yes.
and when things are tightly held, we lose that ability to play with them. So yeah, so I wanted to say that and
Can I add a
go on.
couple more
Yeah,
before you
yes,
jump on the practical things? I think
yes.
you touched upon a very important point. We are also obsessed about this productivity. Everything needs to be practical. Yes, practicality is good. And again, this is really the rational and logical mind. Okay, this fluffy thing, lovey-dovey thing, but it's all in the mind. What am I supposed to do with that? All this uncertainty, this imagination, fairy tales, like, God, what's the use case? The use case is the most innovative products in the world. When you looked into why Steve Jobs get into this calligraphy, it looked like nonsense,
Yeah.
no practical use at all. And he introduced one of the most beautiful products into the world just because of that nonsense, non-practical thing that his heart was calling at the time. And again, to me, I might be bringing a little bit more, again, fluffy spiritual concepts into our conversation. And again, in that particular book, I really liked a particular line. It's somewhere in the beginning. It says, at one point, science will finally catch up with art, and art will finally catch up with spirituality. Ooh. To me, it's really like so true in my human evolution. Again, me being a humble human being, I was on the science path. Now I am experiencing more of the arts, and I know that the future of arts is also spirituality too, because everything is interconnected. And coming back to this human dilemma about certainty versus uncertainty, we want everything to be practical because we feel like with our egoistic minds, with our certain plans about here's what I'm going to do in 5 years, or for that I need to acquire this skill and do this thing. It's like our human mind, ego planning, as if I have the control in the process. But what that book really articulates very well is really, it's not about doing. It's not about doing. It's about having a particular presence. It's about being in a state of mind, being in a state of consciousness that you can connect to the all. And with our human mind and capacity, we might not really understand what that all is. Our human mind is limited. So we want to really control things with our limited human mind capacity, our egos. But once we really can surpass that level and connect to that universal wisdom at the level of just pure being, we might not understand it, but we become channels for the ultimate creativity, ultimate practical things come into life in a way that might be different than what we originally intended to do with our little small human mind.
Oh yeah.
At least that's my interpretation of that beautiful book too. Like, how can you just maybe let science, let art lead into that presence so that through that presence, you can create the most beautiful art, the most beautiful businesses in a way that really honors human potential, in a way that honors collective wisdom of the group. Otherwise, I think we are always playing in suboptimal fields creating Me Too products with our egoistic, limited human minds. Why don't we reverse it? Instead of being obsessed about control, practicality, knowing in this uncertain world, why don't we just step back and acknowledge that it's okay not to know? It's okay not to have this long-term plans and immediate practical things, that we might not know what the big picture is. Like, we all play a role in this bigger collective life. And
Yes.
I think the only measure that can really help us to maybe understand whether we are in the right place is our heart's answer. If you love something, if you can really let your heart lead the way, similar to what Steve Jobs did at the time, he was just attracted to something.
Yes.
Like, at this stage in my life, I was attracted to fairy tales, not knowing why, but it's so attractive to me. And I know that I will retrospectively, in 10 years, hopefully, when we have this conversation, I'm going to tell, like, Ethan, you remember, like 10 years ago, I had no idea about what fairy tales was really making in my life. I just received the invitation. It just felt right. And I followed the invite. And I don't know what in the future I'm going to do with fairy tales. And it's okay. That's the other thing. I think, again, I'm not really great with names. I read a lot and I research a lot, but someone was also articulating sometimes like big leaps in life, like this computer. It happens sometimes in generations. Sometimes someone's lifetime might be dedicated to creating a little small piece of a particular thing, like a chip. That's going to make this revolution available in the future. And little small things we do with our hearts can make a contribution in our lifetimes, maybe in the future, but sometimes it might be a puzzle piece for a next generation's invention and some big human step. We might not know that too. And again, we are so small in our thinking. Yes, I'm not saying that let's not optimize our human spans, like human lives. Let's do some practical things with it too. I'm only inviting a little bit more heart's wisdom that's connected to holistic human wisdom, more into the game, so that we are not really playing this egoistic game of what's in it for me, what's the practical thing that I need to earn, I need to gain. Just play it. That's the most practical thing. And maybe we are only here just to follow our hearts and play and enjoy the game as well. I feel like we take it so serious. This is, again, me acknowledging some of the things that I'm trying to unlearn. I am so serious. I am still so serious. This is me trying not to be serious talking about these topics. But yes, I am coming from an engineering background, very serious. I graduated from one of the biggest, most prestigious business schools in the world, and I led quite prestigious organizational teams. And I say, yeah, I was always serious, as if we know everything, as if it's the most important thing in the world. Yes, it is important. It's important to have ownership. It's important to have responsibility. It's important to be an active participant in the game. But it's also a game too. It's also important to play. It's also important to loosen our expectations. Another very important thing in this book is really the importance of expectation. I think in business world, in humanity, we always have expectations. It's again the to-do mindset. I'm going to do this with the expectation of that, creating this. But if you don't know, and that's the other thing, most of the time as human beings, we don't know. We feel like this goal is going to make me happy. We climb at the top of the mountain. We have the same presence. Nothing has changed. We are unhappy. And I said, oh, something is wrong. We never say, like, I don't know. And it's okay not to know. And with that humility, just play, figure things out. I was many times criticized with my attention to the process in the business world, because most of the leaders were really under pressure of outcomes. Okay, you have been playing with this thing for 2 months. Show me the outcome. And I was really always paying attention to the process. Here is the culture that we are building. Here's the process. Step 1, step 2. It might lead into something. It might not lead into something. This time it might work. It might not work. We are learning. And every time I was really switched from the process to the outcome. Right. But life is the journey. Life is the process. And again, I'm not really negating the importance of bringing some control mechanisms into the business world, where as a leader you have to sign up for some certainty. Yes, let's not neglect that importance, but let's also make sure that we are opening up enough space for the journey to unfold without certain expectations. And just because of that, art is really quite important. This is one of the important things Rick Rubin was talking about in that book. He was saying that most of the artists, they just flow without a certain expectation. And regardless of what our role is in the business world, I think we all need to practice art just to loosen a little bit. Wow, I am so chatty today. I will shut up.
Well, this is an expression. I mean, this is actually an expression of what we're talking about, which is being in the unknown and expressing something in a particular direction. So we don't know the specific outcome. I mean, we might know like the shape of the outcome. We don't know the specific steps, but we have we have a sense of the direction that's coming from our heart, like you said.
Yes.
And in business, it's you give the example of Steve Jobs, but there's somebody, a CEO called Jim Mann, who's making Undo, which is a carbon removal company, and like they're grinding up rocks, and it looks like a very scalable, amazing solution. And he, he had this dream of, oh, I just want to do something about climate. He came across a paper that said, oh, these ground up rocks can absorb carbon. And he's like, well, somebody must be doing something about it, but nobody's doing anything about it. It's like, well, if I just follow this thing, I guess I'll do it. But I don't know how. Who on earth knows how to to remove 10 billion tons of carbon or whatever it is from the atmosphere? And it's just following that to the next step and the next step and the next step. But the willingness to be in that unknown and just following the direction and trusting that like if you're guided to go a certain way, that you have it in you to be able to move one step at a time in that direction.
Yes.
So one of the practices I do, and a practical thing that somebody could try, is if you're used to really prepping a lot and thinking a lot before a meeting or before a conversation, like, oh, if they say this, I'll say this. If they, which I've been there, and just try it out on a low stakes conversation. Go in there and just drop your ideas of they're like this, they will say this, I need to whatever. Drop all of that. Maybe have an intention, like, and have it be your highest intention, maybe, for the conversation, and just go in there and listen and see what happens. Like that was one of my practices, and of course, as a coach, like that was like pivotal for me. Once I started doing that, it's like it was magic. It was connection. Like people feel listened to because I'm actually listening. Surprise, surprise. Right.
Someone is listening with full presence.
Yeah.
Such a gift.
and then what really helped me also was my rational mind was so surprised. Like, oh my God, what am I saying here? Like, oh, that went quite well. That's strange. Like it was struggling to make sense of it. Like, but I didn't plan out everything. I mean, I might have prepared. I'm not saying you can't prepare, but do what makes sense. And you probably know when you go overboard, just to make sure you get every detail and try to memorize everything, right? And if you can introduce a bit more openness, a bit more flow into a conversation, that can be a great entryway into leading authentically in the unknown.
I love it. And for the audience, actually, we practiced this just before our meeting. Ethan took the leadership by setting our intention, which was really such a beautiful way of inviting what's supposed to come through our conversation. And I can only echo, I think the most important thing is really having that intention clearly set in the beginning of a meeting and just being fully present so that whatever is supposed to come up through this interaction can come up. And it might be actually quite interesting for us, like once we open that space, in that space, we just turn out to be like channels. Coming back to this particular book, just yesterday, I was listening to an interview of Rick Rubin because I liked his book so much and I really enjoyed his personality too. And in this interview, On Being is the podcast related to his book's title too. So for the ones who would like to listen, he was saying a little bit more about the process that led into the creation of this book. It was really him observing the creative process and taking notes over the last 7 to 8 years. And he was saying that writing the book or letting the book to come through himself was really such an amazing learning personally for him too. Like he's like, oh, I'm opening my book and learning something.
Yeah.
I had the same experience. Like when I listen to probably this conversation in the future, I'm just going to say, because it's not prepared at all. It's just a natural flow that just happens within the presence. I am learning through this. I listen to myself. I do contemplations personally in my personal account too. And after listening to the contemplation, I gain a wisdom through that openness that I turned out to be channel for. I said, oh, interesting. It's in me. And only through writing, only through speaking, it's coming out. And I'm surprised in the moments like, oh, I get it right now.
Yes.
And to me, that presence is really important. And for that presence to happen, it's again human will. It's important to really invite that presence to come in.
Wow. Yeah, wow. We're at time now, Dirk. And
it was a beautiful flow once again.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I really appreciate this conversation. And whoever's listening, if there's something, it can be just one piece of this conversation that resonated with you, like pick it up and play with it. That's what I would say.
Yes. And I would like to actually learn more from the collective wisdom too. If there's one thing that resonates, I would appreciate if you can share it in the comments too. This is not just to fake the algorithms. That's not our intention. I am seriously interested in learning more in a collective community. Like what resonated in your experience through what we shared today. And it could be even personal messages too. I'm just all for learning together and growing together.
Yeah, I mean, both of us, Doruk and I, we both have scrapes and bruises everywhere from this journey. So, like, there's no perfection here. It's like, I love what you said there, like a collective journey. And I would also love to hear what anyone has to share.
Yeah.
All right, Doruk, until next
time. As always, thank you so much, Ethan. Thank you for opening the space. Thank you for a beautiful conversation. Looking forward to the next one. And who knows what it will be about.
Absolutely.
Let's keep it as magic of the flow.
Absolutely.
See you next time.
Pause this. See you. Bye.
Bye.